Okay, today what we're going to be doing, guys, is we are going to be going over the examples for the review so that way you guys can see the example, how it's done, and then be able to reciprocate it on the paper itself. So, first things first is PEMDAS. PEMDAS stands for parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, adding, subtracting, and it means the order in which we actually solve equations that just have numbers. So, if we look at this first one, we see that parentheses comes first. So we look inside the parentheses. Well, we have two operations inside those parentheses. We have adding and we have division. Unfortunately, we have to go in order of PEMDAS again. So we have to actually go with division before we go with adding. So first we're going to divide. We're going to take 6 divided by 2 and we're going to get 3. And then we're going to bring everything else down. Once again, we're not done with the parentheses, so we're going to go back in the parentheses. Now we've got addition. We got 2 plus 3, which equals 5. Okay, so we're done with these parentheses. Now we have to go on to the next step, which is exponents. Well, the only exponent I see was with the parentheses. So now we have to take this 5 and we have to square it. Now remember, squaring means you take the number and multiply it by itself. So we're going to take 5 times 5, and we're going to get 25. Now the next step is to do multiplication and division. Well, I have two multiplications, one here and one in front of the parentheses. So we're going to do this from left to right. So you don't want to take the 3 minus the 2 first, you want to do the multiplication first. So since this negative 2 is in front and this is negative because it has a minus sign, we're going to multiply 25 by negative 2. So we're going to get 3 minus 50 times 3. And then we're going to do multiplication again. We're going to take the 50 times 3. Now remember, this is a negative 50, so we have to still take negative 50 times 3, so it would be 3 minus 150, which would end up being negative 147. Okay? That's how PEMDAS works. So I want you guys to try these 3 order of operations here, and then move on to the next part of the video. Alright, next example is for proportions. The first step with any proportion is to cross multiply. So, let me get a little bit closer. Okay, so you have 2x minus 4 over 5 equals x minus 2 over 6. Whenever you have this little type of expression over a division sign, you're going to pretend like there's little parentheses there. I'm going to show you why. Because our first step is actually to cross multiply. That means take the denominator, multiply by the numerator of the other side. Denominator multiply by the numerator. So we're going to take 5 times this, so we're going to put 5 parentheses x minus 2 equals 6 parentheses 2x minus 4. So remember, all we do is cross multiply. Now that we actually have a number in front of the parentheses, we have to distribute it. So we got to distribute these two things. So you get 5x minus 10 equals, and we're going to distribute the other side. We're going to get 12x minus 24. Okay. Next step is we're going to have to try to get everything on one side, meaning the x is all on one side and the numbers on the other side. So we're not going to multiply or divide until we get everything where it needs to be. So I always tell you guys to do the x house and the number house. I always say to find the biggest x, call it the x house, and then the other side will be the number house. That means anything that has a x to it needs to go to the x house, and anything that does not have an x next to it needs to go to the number house. Well, if we look at the x house, we have a 12x. Okay, that has an x next to it, so we need to keep it there. And we have a negative 24. Well, we have to get rid of that minus 24 because it does not have an x to it, and it's in the x house, so we need to get rid of it. So the opposite of subtracting is to add it to both sides. You get 5x plus 14 equals 12x. Now, in the number house, we have an x that should not be there. So once again, you have to add or subtract it to get rid of it instead of multiplying or dividing, because not everyone's home in their house. So the 5 has to go home. So to do that, we have to subtract it since it's positive. So we get 14 equals 7x. Finally, everyone's in their house. You have the 14 in its house, you have the 7 in its house. Now we can multiply or divide. But since the 7 is next to the x, we're going to divide by 7. And that's going to give you x equals 2. Okay, so I want you to try the proportions section. When you get done with that, go into the next. Okay. Now we did this kind of already, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Okay, so you have the examples for solving for x. This one looks like this is the third step in the proportions problem. So, step 1 is name the x and number houses. X number. Remember, we're trying to get all the x's to their house and all the numbers to their house by adding or subtracting before we do anything else. So, we're going to look at the x house. The x house is a 9x and a negative 17. Well, the 9 has an x, so we don't get rid of that, so we had to get rid of the 17, so we're going to add that to both sides. So we'll get 3x plus 12 equals 9x. Okay, now the 3x is in the number house, and it doesn't need to be in the number house because it has an x with it, so it needs to leave. To do that, you have to subtract it. So you get 12 equals 6x. Finally, we want to get the x by itself. The x's are in the x house, the numbers are in the number house. So now we can multiply or divide, but we're just going to divide by 6. And get x equals 2. Alright. Now this next one's a little bit more tricky, and that's why I put both of these examples on here. This one, you see that we have numbers in front of the parentheses. You always have to distribute before you do anything else. So first let's distribute this 3. This becomes 3x plus 15. Now this next part people get confused on. They see the 2 and they think, oh, I'm just multiplying by 2. But it also comes along with this negative sign in front. So we actually have to multiply everything by negative 2. So this first one will be negative 6 x, and the second part will be negative 12. And we still set it equal to 15. Now, when we get to this point, we have to look at, okay, so do we have any like terms on the same side of the equal sign? Now, if you really put a line down here, you see that there's two sides. You have the 15s on one side and all this bunch of stuff on the other side. So anything with an x combines and anything without an x combines. So the two things with x's are this 3, it's positive, and the 6, which has a negative sign in front of it, so it's negative. 3 and a negative 6 make negative 3 x. You have a positive 15, you have a negative 12. So they combine, you get positive 3. And so you have this 15 over here. So now what we have to do is we have to solve for x. So, step 1, get rid of the number. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides. You're going to get negative 3x and then you're going to get 12. Now the reason why we didn't do an x house and a number house is because the x's were all on one side. It would be kind of pointless to do so. So technically this house, since it had the x's already and the other side didn't, we can just say, okay, well, this will be the x house, so this will be the number house. And it'll work like that. So now we got negative 3x equals 12. So now we're going to divide by negative 3, because everyone's in their house. You get x equals negative 4. And that's your answer. So I want you to try these four here and solve it. And then we can go on to chapter 2. Okay, chapter 2. So, this chapter involves point slope form. So it's y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So the different parts of this. This is slope. Okay? And then the y1 and the x1 are a point that they give you. The y and the x stay normal, so these two, this one, and this one, they don't do anything. They just stay there, they remain as y and x. But these three are replaced with whatever numbers they give us. So like in this first one, they give you 2 points. So technically we have to use slope formula to find the slope, and then we can do the whole point slope form. Okay? Now the directions say find slope and put it into slope intercept form. This is not slope intercept form. What it means is to put it in the y equals mx plus b form. So let's do, when they give you 2 points, you first have to set up that this is your x1, this is your y1, this is your x2, this is your y2, and we're using y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now technically, you can switch up the x's and the y's as long as y2 is always with x2, y1 is always with x1. So this could be x1 if you wanted, because it'll come out with the same answer no matter what. But I always, if it's the first x, I always tell you guys to do the first and second x like you see it. So y2 is negative 3. And then this equation has a negative sign, so we have to put that negative sign in. And then we look at y1. Well, y1 also has a negative sign, so we got to put that extra negative sign in there. And then we get x, which is 6, minus x1, which is 3. So these two negative signs have to turn into a positive sign because 2 negatives makes a positive. And now we combine together. Negative 3 plus 4 becomes positive 1. 6 minus 3 is 3. So our slope is 1/3. So this is our m. We've already got our x1, we've already got our y1, we got our m now. So we can plug that all into this. So we're going to do y minus y1, which is negative 4, equals m 1/3 times x minus x1, which is 3. Okay. We have 2 negative signs, this is going to be a plus sign. Okay. And then our first step is to actually take this 1/3 and multiply the two things on the inside. Now remember, when you do this in your calculator, you take 1 divided by 3 and you're going to multiply it by this negative 3. And that's how you get it. So we get y plus 4 equals 1 over 3 x. When you put that in your calculator, 1 divided by 3 times negative 3, you should get negative 1. And then finally, if you notice up here, this y is by itself, so we want to get this y by itself. You can see a plus 4 here, so we want to get rid of that plus 4 by subtracting 4 on both sides. So you end up with y equals 1/3 x minus 5. And that's how you do it when you're given 2